everybody, and welcome to another edition of Joe's Rod Shop. All right, so we got a great show lined up for today. But first, just a few things we need to get through. Remember, click that like and subscribe button. We want to hear from you guys. You get notifications, and yeah, you know when we bring out new shows. Because I just load these things whenever I feel like it. All right, so this episode is brought to you by the V8 Shop. Now, the V8 Shop is one of the oldest, longest running V8 suppliers in the country. They're based in Alberton. Great bunch of guys. Check out their Facebook page for a bunch of new stuff coming out, and there's a lot of new things happening with them. So go check out the V8 Shop on Facebook, and you can check out their website, even though we're obviously working on that. There's some changes happening there. All right. Now, for today's show is about the right to repair. Now, this has been a buzzword all over the world, and it's huge in the motoring industry. Obviously, what it does is it's putting the power back into the consumer's hands. So if you buy a car and you've got a warranty, you no longer have to take a car through to the dealer where you bought it, or the dealers. You can actually have it serviced everywhere as long as it's a registered, qualified guy. But it opens up like a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, so it's going to create more jobs. It's taking away, I don't like using the word monopoly, but yeah, it takes away all of that. It helps brands come out, and we're hoping it's going to change the whole way. For today, we have the guys from Gumtree on the show, and they're actually going to explain to us, and they're going to talk to us about this whole process, what the right to repair is, how it works, how it's going to affect all of us, and what Gumtree is actually going to be doing, and how they're getting involved with the whole thing. So remember, go like, subscribe, and enjoy the show. All right, well, welcome to the show. Oh, really great. We just going to jump straight into it. You want to do introduction quickly, who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So firstly, thanks, Joe, for the invite. So my name is Nunben Dixon. I'm head of Automotive at Gumtree South Africa. The Gumtree team, the Gumtree brand, very well known in South Africa, of course. We always have this quip or joke that we've yet to meet anybody, young, old, and everything in between, that doesn't know the brand, and many of them have actually used it. Exactly. So once again, thanks for the invite.
No, good. We actually had Jeff Osborne on the show before he left you guys. Yes. And I think Richard, that works with you guys now, I had him on the show, I think, before he started with you guys. So yeah, we're very big Gumtree supporters on this side. So don't worry.
Fantastic.
Now, we're talking today about the right to repair. Now, how did you guys get involved and behind this whole thing? But I don't know if we should actually explain to people what the right to repair really is.
Yeah, sure. So maybe let's start with our involvement. So just to sort of a disclaimer from the outset. So we haven't been directly involved, with this campaign. That the Competitions Commission calls it, guidelines on repairs in the aftermarket sort of sector of the motor industry, of course. But in terms of, just so they've been driven by various, interest groups. Right to Repair is an organization in itself that has been lobbying for the changes that we now see. And then, of course, you also have, individuals, various other interest groups, etc., that have been involved.
Noise? Sorry, what's that noise in the background? Because I can hardly hear you.
I think it's, give me 1 sec.
No problem.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. So maybe what we can talk about is that's pretty much they lobbied in terms of the current status quo being anti-competitive, and as a result, what's happened is it was lodged, of course, with the Competitions Commission. The Commission would have heard the various submissions and inputs. I would imagine not just from those that were directly affected and that lodged their concerns, but also those that were affected by it, such as the OEMs and dealerships, etc. But in terms of, so the right to repair sort of phrasing is used interchangeably with these guidelines that have been published by the Competitions Commission. So, I've been through the regulations and their guidelines, and I can't pick up, a particular reference to right to repair apart from the fact that it speaks to this concept, if I could put it that way, the ability to of the right to repair.
So from a layman's perspective, a layman's perspective,
Sure.
basically what it means is you will be able to take your car for a service anywhere. You don't have to go to a dealer like you used to. Okay, they
Yes,
can't
so absolutely.
without losing your warranty, if I understand correctly.
Correct. So yeah, I think you're right. Let's start with kind of just some high level, sort of guidelines as we see it on this sort of right to repair. So, previous or the current dispensation is that if you buy a new vehicle from a franchise dealer, invariably it comes with most, if not all of them, it comes with a warranty. So it's a cost vehicle. It comes with a warranty, and it comes with a service or a maintenance plan. Now, with the current status quo, let's assume for the purposes of discussion, the vehicle costs 500,000 Rand. You see a globular aggregated number of 500,000 Rand, you either pay the cash or you get it financed and off you go. When it comes to now whether the service or maintenance plan accounts for 10% of that cost and the warranty 20% of the vehicle, the remaining percentage, nobody really knows. You kind of accept it for what it is and off you go with your vehicle. When it comes to the maintenance of that vehicle, invariably it's covered by the maintenance plan, and you take it back to get it maintained, or if there's a warranty claim, you take it back and it will be fulfilled by that particular dealership, as an example. With the changes that are coming effective, the 1st of July, what this means is that the component of the service or maintenance plan of that 500,000 in the example that I've just used, firstly is disclosed to the consumer. So that it comes that it's 100,000 Rand of the 500,000 Rand is attributable to the maintenance or the service plan as an example.
Yeah.
And you now have the sort of the right of choice as the consumer to say, sure, thank you for the 100,000 Rand maintenance plan that you're offering to me, but I'm not interested in it any longer. I don't want, so I will pay 400,000 Rand for the vehicle, and I can now have the vehicle serviced at an independent workshop, and the guidelines refer to them as ISPs, independent service providers.
Yeah.
I'm going to service it at this independent workshop, and here's the sort of the change without compromise to my warranty. Now, with the current dispensation, if I service it at an ISP, independent service provider, I immediately lose the warranty of the vehicle because it's serviced outside of that dealership network of that particular brand. So that, in the main, I think is the main difference.
But this is going to have a big impact because look, I grew up in a workshop with my dad was servicing Mercs and Hondas and this type of stuff back in the day. And when the maintenance plan system came in, that really killed that section of the market. I mean, your Bosch service stations, all these guys, because basically the only time you could take your car in to anyone like that was like once it's out of warranty and out of everything, then you could take it to an independent more than anything else. But it also meant, which means your car from the day of purchase, there's a 5-year gap where you have to have your car at OEM, and everybody else is that. And that also created a problem where if you were living in an area and there wasn't a dealership close to you, you had to try and get a car 50, 60, 100 kilometers away to you to a represented service guy in order to have your car serviced, instead of using a local shop or someone in the area.
Sure, absolutely. So that the landscape now changes, and to your point, it creates a more, a wider distribution, in terms of where one can do business. And your point exactly. I mean, it's easy to say, it's not much of an issue if I'm living in Joburg or Cape Town or Durban, as an example. If you're living out in the sticks somewhere and you've got a 100-kilometer trek to get your vehicle serviced, it of course can be quite significant.
Exactly, which means if anything happened to your vehicle and if you think about it, then everything comes in. If the car breaks down, it's towing, it's everything that comes in, it's all costs that you're sitting with all of a sudden. Where the first town might have a mechanic that could actually be able to look at the car. Now they just go, sorry, can't touch it, needs to send it away, it needs to go somewhere else. But
absolutely.
To me, this also gives a lot more opportunity from a product perspective that comes into it. If you're looking at aftermarket products, and I don't want to just say aftermarket like OEM type stuff, your brake pads, spark plugs, all this type of stuff, because what people don't understand is these companies normally negotiate directly with the OEM. So if you've got Feroda or someone, they will have a deal with BMW, and the brakes that go into BMW cars are Feroda. You do not have any choice of what brake pads or anything goes into your car, what spark plugs or anything go into it. And it stopped that whole section of the market growing, because these products, brands could not go in anywhere unless they had a contract with one of the 5 big dealerships in the country. They were stuck. They can't. Their only market then is hitting the Midases and these guys, and hoping for the guys who cars are 5 years down the line and out of repair.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, as we know, maybe your listeners won't know, components are not manufactured by motor vehicle manufacturers. So you pick a brand, even though it's branded based on whatever the manufacturer's brand is, it's outsourced to what we refer to as OE factories.
Yeah.
So original equipment, and they would obviously spec quality standards and all of that, and then sort of recourse for the consumer, etc., which is, I think, in itself a powerful proposition. We know that the parts will then be of an acceptable, quality standard. But the challenge here is that, under the current dispensation, if the spark plug, as an example, is branded Bosch versus the manufacturer's name, whatever it may be, you run the risk of then losing your warranty, even though it came out of the same factory in many instances,
yes,
with equal, if not better quality in other instances. So, which in a sense does lead to it being anti-competitive. But having said that, there are inherent, there's always 2 sides to a story, and 2 ways of looking at things. I do believe that in terms of the impact on the industry, now, if we take that into franchise dealers as well as non-franchise dealers, I still do see that some consumers will take comfort in the fact that I'm servicing it at a local franchise dealer, and I see recourse as being my primary driver to want to go and service it. Because if something does go south, as it sometimes can, I do have a recourse of dealing with a big dealership group, as an example, and it's going to get sorted out.
But like I said, it really does change the playing field, and it does, put power back into the consumer's hands, with where to go and what to do. And like I said, I mean, the job creation, it can be is absolutely enormous. Because
yes, sure. So I think that the consumer, for me, the most powerful impact that the legislation or the regulations would have, and the guidelines that we would have, is that it places choice in the hands of the consumer. I don't see, personally foresee that, either sector in the short term, in any event, is either going to grow or shrink significantly or materially. I do think that initially, I think the shocks will eventually kind of will stabilize out to the extent that franchise dealers will still continue to see that they have a place in this whole discussion of servicing of cars, et cetera, et cetera. And just a point to make there, that this doesn't apply to in-warranty repairs. So if the vehicle has an issue and it's a warranty claim, it still needs to be serviced within the existing framework.
Okay,
so it can't go to an independent service provider. So I think that's an important point. And then secondly, I think recourse is very important to most consumers, if not all of them. And one, to know that they're dealing with a credible supplier of a service is very, very important, because if things do go south, as they sometimes can, that I can then have my issue attended to. And also, I just want to make a point here that the consumers also need to be wary of the fact and aware of the fact that when dealing with a service provider, even if it's an independent service provider, as guidelines refer to them as, that they need to ensure that as much as they may have recourse in terms of the Consumer Protection Act, as another instance, that they're dealing with a business that is suitably insured to deal with the claim in the event of there being one.
That's the next point I wanted to make.
Saying that, sure, anybody can service my car, and so I'm going to go to Nunben and he does work in his backyard, he does admin by day and services cars at night for a bit of extra money, but has no insurance, in the event of there being a claim, there's still going to be problems. If I'm not insured and I don't have the requisite.
Well, you want to stay with reputable companies. So, and I mean, that's the next question. Exactly. This doesn't mean that you can go to your uncle's cousin's best friend, and he can quickly put a service together for you. You still need to work. You still need to be clever. You still need to work within the guidelines and make sure that you're sending the car to a reputable company with a reputable brand that actually know and have the biggest thing, has the equipment to actually work on your car.
For sure.
More than anything else.
For sure. And I think that, it's also important to understand that the quality of parts that are being used and the consumer, we live in an information age where consumers are more aware of parts and all sorts of things, which is right and it's good. It's the right, I think we're going in the right direction with the fourth industrial revolution, etc. However, having said that, it's also incumbent upon the consumer to be aware of what parts are being put into the vehicle.
Exactly.
Even though the guidelines talks about non-original parts, you can get counterfeit and inferior parts that are being fitted to a vehicle. One must realize that even again in a warranty claim, if you are servicing outside of a franchise dealer, as an example, and an inferior part is fitted to the vehicle, and it's subsequently found to be that the fault in the engine, as an example, was as a result of a real cheap, inferior quality oil filter that's being used, as an example. Even though the consumer still has recourse in terms of going up the line, as the CPA, speaks of about consequential damage, etc., I still do think that you don't want to be sitting with that issue, and you're out of not having your vehicle in use for 6 months whilst you get the issue resolved. Doesn't solve your issue of not having a vehicle for 6 months, despite the fact that you have recourse. So the point there is that the consumer needs to be aware of the quality of not just the service provider, but also the parts that they're using in a vehicle.
Exactly.
And so you have to start, and my kind of guideline would be that as much as you're not using a branded part from a particular manufacturer, you still should go for what's referred to as OEE, or original equipment equivalent.
Yeah.
So back to my example, it's a Bosch spark plug, not branded according to that particular manufacturer, but it's Bosch, it's a quality part, it's a massive entity globally, etc., so that the quality of the part is beyond question.
But look what's happening more these days, especially cars that are completely out of warranty, that where there's been a large amount of parts. And I know because I've done this in the past, where I'd have a car and there's a problem, and I'd contact the dealers and try and price the part locally, and it comes with a massive bill on it. And I luckily, look, I'm in the motor trade, so I know where to go, who to talk to, what brands and stuff are out there. I start looking internationally to find the parts and stuff there. I then find the part, bring it in at I then bring the part in at half the price of what it would have cost you to go buy it from the representative company locally. Once again, it's the same scenario. It's actually made by the same people. The only difference is it doesn't have that brand stamped or printed on it somewhere, which make it. Are you guys foreseeing that's more going to happen now? Because it does open up the part section a lot more, or it opens South Africa up. I mean, I work with a lot of international, especially on the V8s and American V8s parts and stuff. And these companies are looking at South Africa going, well, we could never get into this country. There was no point in us, or we could get into the country, but we could only look at old stock. We could never look at the new, more modern cars, because we were not allowed to. You cannot go buy a part from Edelbrock and install it into a new Mustang and keep your warranty, even though the part is superior and it is a high performance part and all this type of stuff, but you can't do it because warranty's out the window immediately.
Sure, absolutely. So I do think that, in terms of, additional players entering the space is definitely going to be a consequence of this, change in dispensation, as it were. And so, we would find that, the players such as, some of these overseas players that have very niche parts, etc., that historically were only dealing with classic cars, as an example, and exporting it into South Africa. now seeing that we have an opportunity here to kind of broaden our range and supply other parts to newer models and derivatives, etc. So I think definitely, the only thing is South Africa is a relatively small market, with very different challenges to what you would find in some of the more first world economies. So that could be a toss-up in my mind in any event between now how big is the market versus the opportunity.
Are you just going to be filtering
et
it down? Yeah. Is it going to be filtering up? How big is the pie? And are we just going to be cutting up the pie even bigger?
For sure. Absolutely. And what you would find is, petrolheads such as yourself, myself even for that matter, is that now I've been in that position myself, where you're trying to either source a part and it's crazy expensive locally because it's on back order from Germany, wherever the case could be, and even landed costs through the traditional networks. It's an exorbitant cost, and you see
timeline. That was the other issue. It's timeline. That you speak to the local guy and I need this part, and like, the next shipment's coming in 5 months, and you're like,
for sure.
And you phone someone in the US and you've got it a week later,
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been in exactly the same position, and you go on to eBay even for that matter, and you pick it up there, and you've got it in a couple of days or whatever it may be.
Exactly. But now, what is Gumtree's part in all of this? I mean, because you guys obviously from the parts section, I mean, I know you guys have been growing the parts section quite big, and everybody always thinks that the main thing that you guys are promoting is secondhand parts, which is not. You guys actually do push an enormous amount of new parts through Gumtree as well.
Sure, absolutely. So, if one visits the site, and I think that's a great question, Joe. So, I think if one visits the site, so you'll see that the categories within the auto parts section have been expanded to the extent that we've got, engine parts, body parts, replacement parts, tires and rims, audio equipment, accessories, etc., etc. And I think the reason why we've pushed for those changes on the site locally, and for those that don't know, we owned at the moment by eBay, which is the largest e-commerce site in the world, and it's because we see auto parts as really being the elephant in the room. Because unlike cars where a car gets you from point A to B, it's just how you get there. You want a Ferrari or do you want a Beetle? It's that kind of discussion. Parts, give or take, the exceptions are very bespoke, and it's a one-to-one relationship. So in other words, if I want a water pump for my BMW E30 325i, I need a water pump for the BMW E30 325i. I can't buy a water pump that fits into a Mustang.
Exactly.
It could be cheaper or more expensive. It doesn't really matter. It's not going to work.
Well, it depends on who your friends are and how much modifications they can do.
And maybe even depending on who your mechanic is.
Exactly.
You make it fit. So I think that, it's really, but as you know, and I think, as well as I did from better, the current journey to buying a part, you phone a spare shop, your local spare shop, the guy answers, and literally before he says hello, asks you to hold on, and you're holding on for 10 minutes, and you accept it. It's part of the journey, not so. As a petrolhead, you accept it. I'm going to hold it for a couple of minutes, and then he comes onto the phone. He's dealing with the guy at his counter, and then you give him a VIN number, whatever the case could be, and then he says, "Yeah, sure, I've got it," and then off you go, and then you're standing in the queue again when you get there. And hopefully, if you haven't stripped the water pump out of the car, as an example, and you don't know what it looks like, you kind of buy it and it's not right, you go back, etc. And the whole process is 10 steps and it's 2 days long sometimes. So the point is that the online journey to buying and selling of parts, for me and for us in any case within Gumtree, is a logical one. That should be the next step. Where it's part number driven as an example, and we kind of, you see this water pump, you've got a VIN number, you've got an identifier with a part number, etc., etc. You know what you want, you kind of know what it looks like. You go onto a site such as ours, you see Nunben's got this water pump for that Ford Mustang as an example, and then you buy it. The thing is that you and then it gets delivered to you a day or two later, versus the frustration of holding on, walking onto the floor, hoping that's the right thing, etc., and all of those kinds, and the costs associated with it. So our part to play, we see, being this big brand that we are in South Africa, is to play an enabling role in the journey to buying and selling of parts, and creating that optimal matching of demand and supply. And remember, us big petrolheads, it's not just the traditional sellers of parts, the big parts, you mentioned Midas as an example, I'll use it as an example as well, of selling parts, and those workshops that procure those parts. There's a whole another ecosystem of enthusiasts such as yourself and myself, I love my old German cars as an example. And very often I'm sitting with stuff that I don't need, that I could sell, and repurpose those parts in somebody else's build.
But that's the truth. You end up, I mean, I had a workshop a few years ago, and I think at one stage I had 3 C10s, Chevy C10 pickup sitting in parts in my shop, just sitting there, there's absolutely nothing you can do. And you can't get it past, it just breaks your heart to try and take stuff like that to the junkyard. It has to go. You'd rather, because there's someone looking for that left front bracket that's going in there.
Exactly right.
So with the creation now for Gumtree, I mean, to me this opens up a lot more, for especially, look, it gives you opportunity that, like, I know my car needs a clutch. This means that a clutch is going to be an expensive thing. It's a big thing coming, and the clutch coming in is going, or to get the part, where it's not, okay, you can space it out. It's something that's to be done in the next 10,000 Ks. You can go find the clutch, and you can go purchase the clutch, and you can keep the clutch, and you can go find this, and you can get everything together, so that you get to the point where you just go to the mechanic and you go, here, there we go. There's the parts, which saves you in the long run more than anything else. Do you think that this will boost the second-hand market a little bit more as well, and create a little bit more into it? Because, I mean, to me, it makes sense. Now it means with every town can have a Bosch service station, a Shell garage, where there's qualified mechanics, that part alone, qualified mechanics instead of part fitters, which to me, that most of the garages that you deal with, the guys are part fitters, because of the warranty systems. They would, if there's a problem on your car, they keep changing parts until it's fixed. That's to me where mechanics and stuff sitting. This means that job creation will be back. We'll have more mechanics, and we'll have more guys getting their hands dirty again, because you can spread out, because your only chances, you're not just worried whether you're going to get into Kia, Ford, or BMW. That's your options. That's where you could go if you wanted to work on cars.
Sure, absolutely. I think that I have little doubt, and I won't mention names. I've seen one of the big brands in South Africa recently relaunching their service centers, and they're talking about kind of guiding the motorists along in terms of quality and inspecting of vehicles and servicing, etc. It was a concept that they launched a couple of years ago, almost a decade ago, and it kind of fizzled out, and now relaunching it again. And I think the reason for that is that they also see the opportunity that you just mentioned, and I have that your independent guys out there will also identify similar opportunities.
Yes.
Where they realize that, listen, here's an opportunity. I have a voice that could be heard at the table because I know what I'm doing, and kind of now the landscape has changed, etc. And so the pool of customers that I had is now grown from what it would have been had we not had this piece of legislation to what it is now. And I definitely see that opportunity arising in the industry. But of course, as you can imagine, that with the good will come the bad. You're going to find, I'll use Nunben as an example, doesn't know which side of a spanner to hold or the screwdriver to hold, and he sees, I can make some money here. Let me now set up a workshop or advertise, and it becomes easy to advertise online, as we know. All the various social media platforms, for that matter. And I see those opportunities, and then I decide, okay, I'm going to take on some of this work. And so I think that the consumer needs to be very aware of who they're dealing with, ensure that they ask the right questions. And as you know, when you're dealing sometimes with certain workshops, even for that matter, let alone a person who doesn't know what they're doing and just has identified an opportunity, they can be very bombastic and strong personalities. And you're dealing with somebody who's kind of not in the industry, who can't roll with the punches, as it were, and kind of accepts what they're saying because of whatever reasons they may be. And then in the process, they get done in by this unscrupulous outfit. And the consumer needs to just kind of be armed with information. If the gut feeling is I shouldn't be dealing with this oak because of X, Y, and Z, I just have a bad feeling, rather walk away. Well, because you don't want to be sitting equally with all of these issues.
But to me, it's also, look, from our perspective, it also comes down to that you want to look at your car, look at your brand, and make sure that the company where you're going deals with that brand. I mean, if you're a Jeep guy, make sure you go to a guy that mainly works on Jeeps. You know,
Sure.
that's the nice part about this is you can go to a specialist. There's enormous amount of 4x4 guys and all this type of stuff that specializes in certain brands. You know, that's because that's normally where their training is from. That's what they've done. And the nice thing is they know that those cars backwards. You know, and I found a lot of times their service and their skill levels. They sometimes know the car better than if you would go to a dealer, to an OEM, because the guy knows, and how can I put it? He knows how to fix it. He knows, okay, well, I've done enough of these things to know that this is the part that gives the issue on this. This is a renowned issue that we need to have. But I do think that our consumers these days, they do. Google is amazing. And Gumtree is amazing. You can go do your homework, you know. You can go when you get a quote from a company on costs and stuff on parts, you can go to Gumtree and you can go vary that up and go, okay, this guy is taking the piss. Okay. Why is he charging me so much for this part when the part is sitting here? It is going to open up enormous amount of freedom. And like I said, you just have to be clever. Don't just pull into the first shop that you see and go fix it. Do what you do with anything. Do your homework. You know.
Absolutely. You know, and you're absolutely right there. And you know, using a specialist very often pays itself, you know, back in, you know, in multiple, simply because you're not paying somebody to do. There's no guesswork, very little guesswork involved. You know, and I'll give you an example of that. I recently bought, and I'm into my older cars. I recently bought a Land Cruiser 90s model. I was in the market for a while, and to see something, flew out and virtually drove it back into Joburg. And the thing is, and to your point exactly, you know, there's a dime a dozen workshops I could have used around me, some people that I know, you know, as well, but they were not specialists. And the specialist that was recommended to me, he is available only sometime towards the end of April. And I said, I'm prepared to wait, 3 weeks, almost a month, purely because of what you've just mentioned. I would rather use a specialist who takes the guesswork out of the repairs to the vehicle and all that needs to be done. So I fit the tires, I did the alignment, I did all the small things that you can get done at a generic workshop. But in terms of more detailed work and a proper assessment of the vehicle, etc., I'm just waiting a month for my first booking with this particular workshop. And it's about 50 km outside of where I live. And the point is that, it's to your point, you know, you don't save in the short term, and then you're paying much more to get it sorted out. You spend the money once.
We had this in the hot rod industry, because I mean, there's always a risk of sending your car to someone that is going to screw something up. Okay. But there's the reputable guys in the industry, and I know the guys, but the reputable guys always have a waiting list. So if you go to a shop and they have a waiting list to get their cars in there, then you know you're in a good place. It's when the guy goes, oh, cool, bring it in tomorrow, we're good. You know, that you need to go, okay, but why have you got space tomorrow?
Exactly right.
And because at the end of the day, if what's that old Afrikaans saying, goedkoop koop is duurkoop. You know,
absolutely.
It comes down to it. Like I said, guys just need to check their market, check who they're going, and speak to them. If they're part of a car club, make sure that it goes through, and do what the age-old thing is go to the family petrol head. That's just go to Oom Koos, who's been building drag racing cars, and go, where should I go? Where should I take my car? Who should I go do that and find the information? If you don't know, put it that way. Other than that, like I said, reputable brands like the Bosch service station and these type of guys, they've got a brand and they've got a product that they need to uphold. I do hope we see. Look, we do need to get away from the backyard mechanic mentality type of things, because it doesn't help the industry more than anything. It actually just causes more issue than anything else. And guys need to step up and start looking at. Shops need to look at that professionalism and stuff getting in, and you walk in and there's parts laying all over and everything's greasy and dirty. They need to raise their game and look professional and get into the right place and the right market. So
Sure. And just the last point, I think, as well, there, in terms of the suppliers of services, these independent. I mean, you mentioned, we've spoken about a few of them. And I think it's also important, apart from, clean workshop, etc., which for me is always a telltale sign of the quality of the work. If the workshop's clean and the guys ordered, etc., and methodical, invariably translates into the work that he's doing on the vehicle. But also for the sector and the industry to, move away from, I'm only dependent on referral business and walk-ins to grow my workshop. The guys need to make this transition into online as well, advertising, what I have to do, and especially the good guys. They need to be celebrated more in the online space, which very often doesn't happen. And they need to also pivot their thinking towards this orientation towards, I need to have an online presence to grow and scale those businesses. Far too often, they're so happy with the existing model that they don't grow it from where it is. And I think that's just an additional element that these good, reputable guys need to take into account. But very often, as you know, the consumer starts off on Google as an example. And then sometimes what happens in that search is the best workshop doesn't come up in the search. It could be somebody that doesn't know what they're doing and kind of just has a good online presence and can market well. And so the good guys need to be celebrated online, and they need to understand that they need to take their businesses online as well.
Well, we found, because a part of my company, we actually manage social media for a bunch of shops and this type of stuff around the country. Because we found that the really good shops don't actually have time to do anything on social media. But it is so true. That's why they say where they get celebrated, and getting good reviews and look, word of mouth does work, but getting your name out there and building your reputation and stuff is the big part where the shops need to go. Definitely.
Absolutely.
So it was great talking to you. I think this has been great. I'd love to touch base with you guys in July, just after all of this goes live. And everything work, and then if we can touch base again and have a discussion again and see how it's going and if everything is going in the direction that we're hoping.
Sure, absolutely, with absolute pleasure. Just let us know, Joe, and thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. All right, thanks a lot, man.
Great, thank you. Cheers, man. Cheers.
Bye.